the deadliest places humans call home. What would drive you to raise your children in a place where the average lifespan is 15 years shorter than the rest of your country? Or build your home where the ground beneath you could open up without warning? Living in these extreme environments is like walking a high wire with no safety net. Every step demands resilience and courage. Today, we're diving into the world's most lethal territories through the eyes of those who endure them. From disease-ravaged regions in Central Africa to the frozen extremes of Oymyakon, Russia, we'll uncover how humans survive in places where life itself hangs by a thread. The perfect storm. Central Africa's disease vulnerability. When we look at a map of the world's most dangerous disease hotspots, Central Africa stands out like a biological warning sign. The Congo Basin region is a unique ecological pressure cooker where geography, climate, and biodiversity combine to create the perfect conditions for deadly pathogens to emerge and spread. Spanning countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Gabon, Cameroon, and parts of Uganda, this region's environment is shaped by an intricate combination of factors. Central Africa's position along the equator creates a consistently hot, humid climate, with temperatures ranging from 24 to 30 degrees Celsius year-round and humidity levels often exceeding 80%. This perpetual warmth and moisture act as an incubator for microorganisms, allowing viruses and bacteria to replicate and mutate at accelerated rates compared to cooler, drier regions. Adding to this, the Congo Basin is home to some of Earth's most diverse ecosystems, containing approximately 20% of all known plant and animal species. The rainforest alone spans over 1.5 million square miles, making it the second largest tropical forest in the world. This extraordinary biodiversity provides countless opportunities for pathogens to adapt and evolve, jumping between animal hosts before potentially infecting humans. Imagine it as a vast, interconnected web where every species plays a role in the survival and transmission of these microorganisms. Satellite imagery reveals a complex mosaic of dense forests, rivers, wetlands, and human settlements. These interface zones, where humans and wildlife live in close proximity, are hotspots for pathogen spillover. For example, fruit bats, suspected reservoirs of Ebola, often feed on fruit trees near villages. When they drop partially eaten fruit or excrete near areas where humans gather food, the virus finds opportunities to cross species. This convergence of human and animal activity creates a perfect storm for disease emergence. The Congo River and its tributaries, forming one of the world's most extensive river systems with over 10,000 miles of navigable waterways, further amplify the risk. These rivers are lifelines for transportation, fishing, and water, but they also act as highways for disease transmission, connecting remote villages to larger population centers. Waterborne pathogens can spread rapidly along these routes, turning isolated outbreaks into regional crises. Central Africa's disease profile is particularly alarming due to the prevalence of zoonotic diseases, those that jump from animals to humans. The region has been the origin of some of humanity's most feared viral hemorrhagic fevers. Ebola, for instance, emerged from the forests of northern DRC and Gabon, while Marburg virus was first identified in lab workers handling African green monkeys from Uganda. Lassa fever continues to circulate in parts of the region. Between 2018 and 2020, the DRC experienced its second largest Ebola outbreak in history, with over 3,470 cases and 2,280 deaths. This was not an isolated event, but part of a troubling pattern that has persisted for decades. The viral families thriving in this region have evolved alongside local wildlife for millions of years. Filoviruses like Ebola and Marburg have established reservoir hosts, likely certain bat species, that carry the viruses without becoming ill. These bats roost in massive colonies throughout the forests, potentially spreading virus-laden saliva and excrement to other animals and, occasionally, humans. During dry seasons, when fruit becomes scarce, bats concentrate around remaining food sources, often near villages. This seasonal stress increases viral shedding precisely when human contact is most likely, creating cyclical risk patterns. The region's soil composition also plays a surprising role in disease ecology. Iron-rich laterite soils support distinct plant communities that attract specific animal species, creating microenvironments where certain pathogens can thrive. Some scientists even hypothesize that soil characteristics might influence the survival of pathogens outside their hosts, though this remains an area of active research. The diversity and lethality of pathogens in Central Africa are staggering. Ebola strains in the region have case fatality rates ranging from 25% to 90%, while Marburg virus infections can kill up to 88% of those infected. Even lesser-known pathogens like Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever can cause devastating illness, with mortality rates exceeding 30%. Researchers have identified at least 6 distinct Ebola virus species circulating in the region, each with unique properties and transmission patterns. This genetic diversity suggests a long evolutionary history within the region's ecosystems, with viral lineages that likely date back thousands of years. Climate factors further exacerbate the risks. The region's pronounced wet and dry seasons influence both wildlife behavior and human activities. During dry periods, communities may travel farther for water, increasing exposure to new environments and potential pathogens. Conversely, heavy rainfall can flood areas, displacing both wildlife and humans and forcing new interactions that wouldn't otherwise occur. These seasonal shifts create a dynamic backdrop for disease emergence. The topography of Central Africa, with its varying elevations from low-lying swamps to mountainous regions, creates distinct microclimates that support different pathogen ecosystems within relatively small areas. Outbreak patterns often follow these topographical distinctions, with certain pathogens appearing more frequently in specific elevation ranges. For example, disease surveillance data shows that disease corridors often align with natural features like river systems or forest edges, highlighting how the landscape itself shapes the spread of diseases. Perhaps most concerning is the likelihood that Central Africa harbors numerous pathogens science has yet to identify. Virologists estimate that less than 1% of the viral diversity in nature has been discovered. The Congo Basin's rich ecosystems almost certainly contain unknown viruses with pandemic potential, biological time bombs waiting for the right conditions to emerge. The region's history underscores its global impact. HIV, which has killed approximately 32 million people worldwide, originated here when a simian immunodeficiency virus jumped from chimpanzees to humans in southeastern Cameroon, likely in the early 20th century. What began as a localized spillover eventually became one of history's deadliest pandemics, demonstrating how pathogens from this region can have far-reaching consequences. Central Africa's disease ecology can be seen as a complex equation. Extraordinary biodiversity, favorable climate conditions, extensive water systems, and increasing human-wildlife interfaces combine to create unparalleled potential for disease emergence. No other region on Earth combines these factors with the same intensity, making it a focal point for understanding and addressing global health risks. The chainsaw effect. How deforestation unleashes deadly pathogens. Deep in Central Africa's rainforests, viruses and pathogens have existed in relative isolation for millennia. The dense canopies and intact ecosystems created natural boundaries that kept diseases contained within animal populations. But human activity is tearing down these biological barriers piece by piece, unleashing pathogens that were once safely sequestered in the wilderness. Satellite imagery from NASA reveals a stark reality. The Congo Basin has lost over 620,000 square kilometers of forest since 1990, an area larger than France. When overlaid with maps of Ebola outbreaks during the same period, nearly 80% occurred within 50 kilometers of significant deforestation zones. This is no coincidence. Deforestation acts like chainsaws cutting through nature's firewall, dismantling the protective barriers that once kept diseases in check. When forests are fragmented, the edges where wilderness meets human activity become hotspots for disease transmission. These edge effects disrupt the balance of intact ecosystems, where diseases typically remain confined to their host species. Logging roads and agricultural clearings carve transition zones into the forest, creating spaces where humans and wildlife collide. A 2018 study in Frontiers in Veterinary Science found that human-wildlife interactions in these zones multiply dramatically. In one example, a rural village that previously recorded 2 to 3 wildlife encounters per month saw that number jump to 15 to 20 after deforestation began. Each encounter represents a new opportunity for pathogens to leap across species. Bats, particularly fruit bats of the Pteropodidae family, are a key reservoir for many of Central Africa's deadliest viruses. Normally, these bats roost high in the forest canopy, far from human activity. But as logging roads penetrate deeper into forests, bats are forced to seek food elsewhere, often congregating in fruit trees near villages and farms. This shift brings them into closer contact with humans, increasing the risk of viral spillover. Primates face similar disruptions. The western lowland gorilla population has declined by 60% in recent decades due to habitat loss. As their feeding grounds disappear, gorillas and chimpanzees raid human crops more frequently, creating direct transmission pathways for simian viruses, including hemorrhagic fever strains. These encounters are no longer rare, but part of a growing pattern of human-wildlife conflict. Rodents, too, thrive in disturbed environments. Forest fragmentation reduces rodent diversity by 40%, while certain species, like the African soft-furred rat, known to carry Lassa fever, experience population explosions. These rats often invade grain stores in rural homes, bringing pathogens directly into human living spaces. Hunting practices further amplify these risks. Logging roads, which open up previously inaccessible forest interiors, have transformed traditional hunting patterns. A single logging concession in northern Congo created 3,000 kilometers of new roads between 2005 and 2015, providing easy access to remote areas. Hunters now process far more animals than before, often for commercial bushmeat markets rather than local subsistence. This shift has turned what was once a localized activity into a multi-million-dollar industry, with urban demand driving the trade. Bushmeat handling creates direct pathways for disease transmission. In market surveys across Central Africa, researchers found that 65% of meat handlers had cuts or sores on their hands while processing carcasses. Blood and bodily fluid exposure is routine during butchering, which often takes place in open-air markets without protective equipment. The butchering process itself is fraught with risks. Hunters are exposed to blood, saliva, cerebrospinal fluid, and digestive tract contents while field dressing animals. These fluids can carry deadly pathogens, including Ebola. Modern hunting methods exacerbate the problem. Where spears or traps once killed animals cleanly, shotguns now create infected wound channels. A study in perilous neglected tropical diseases found that primates hunted with guns were 3 times more likely to test positive for transmissible viruses compared to those taken by traditional methods. Meanwhile, smoking bushmeat, a common preservation method, often fails to reach internal temperatures needed to neutralize viruses. Researchers have even isolated viable Ebola virus particles from smoked bushmeat samples. Deforestation doesn't just alter animal behavior, it reshapes entire ecosystems. Normally, different species maintain spatial separation in intact forests. But habitat loss forces animals into closer proximity around remaining resources. Researchers have documented bats, rodents, and primates sharing the same fruiting trees near forest edges, a phenomenon rarely observed in undisturbed areas. These unnatural gatherings create opportunities for pathogens to mix and mutate. The frequency of spillover events correlates directly with forest disturbance levels. Areas with 10 to 30% deforestation see double the zoonotic disease emergence rate compared to intact forests. In regions with over 30% forest loss, the rate quadruples. Secondary effects of deforestation, like soil erosion and stagnant water pools, further compound the problem. These pools become breeding grounds for mosquitoes, contributing to malaria resurgence in some areas, with infection rates rising by up to 40% after recent logging. The timber industry also plays a role beyond creating access roads. Logging camps, often housing hundreds of workers in close quarters with poor sanitation, have become initial outbreak epicenters. Several Ebola outbreaks have been traced back to such camps near the Republic of Congo-Gabon border. Meanwhile, agricultural expansion into deforested areas creates permanent interface zones. Oil palm plantations, in particular, attract certain bat species while eliminating biodiversity buffers. Similar agricultural patterns in Asia have been linked to Nipah virus outbreaks, raising concerns about Central Africa's expanding plantations. Urban sprawl adds another layer of risk. The population of Kisangani, DRC, has grown 300% since 1980, with new neighborhoods encroaching on former forest lands. City residents now encounter wildlife regularly, from bats roosting in urban fruit trees to monkeys raiding backyard gardens. These interactions, once rare, are becoming part of daily life. Disease surveillance struggles to keep pace with these changes. Health monitoring systems, designed for traditional settlement patterns, often fail to detect outbreaks early in mobile populations traveling along logging roads. By the time an outbreak is identified, it may have already spread considerable distances. The speed of deforestation outpaces scientific understanding. Researchers are still documenting species and relationships in Central Africa's forests, even as these ecosystems disappear. Some potential reservoir species may have gone extinct before their role in disease ecology could be studied, taking with them critical clues about emerging threats. Policy responses have been slow to address the root causes. Conservation laws often exist on paper but lack enforcement. In rural areas, bushmeat provides 80% of protein intake, making outright bans impractical. Solutions must balance forest protection with alternative livelihoods and food sources. Some communities have adapted traditional practices to reduce risks, such as reviving taboos against hunting certain bat species during peak viral shedding seasons. Others have modified butchering techniques after outreach programs explained disease transmission risks without challenging cultural foundations. International attention tends to focus on outbreaks after they occur, rather than preventing the conditions that lead to spillover. Yet every dollar spent on forest protection could save $7 to $20 in future outbreak response costs, according to mathematical models. Central Africa's combination of extraordinary biodiversity, rapid forest loss, and weak health infrastructure creates a perfect storm for emerging pathogens. Where forests once served as nature's containment zones, human development has opened Pandora's box. Villages on the edge. Mapping vulnerability factors. In Central Africa's disease-prone regions, two villages less than 10 kilometers apart can experience completely different outbreak outcomes. One may suffer dozens of deaths from Ebola, while the other records no cases. This disparity stems from measurable factors that make some communities far more vulnerable than others. Epidemiologists now use vulnerability mapping to identify these high-risk zones before outbreaks occur, analyzing an intricate web of environmental, social, and infrastructural elements. Take the real-world example of two villages in Equateur Province, Democratic Republic of Congo. During the 2018 Ebola outbreak, Village A recorded 43 cases with 38 fatalities, while Village B, just 5 kilometers away, had only 2 non-fatal cases. The differences in their outcomes trace back to concrete factors. Village A was located along a newly constructed logging road that cut through prime bat habitat, while Village B sat farther from forest edges. Village A drew water from a shallow creek where animals also drank, while Village B used a protected spring. These seemingly minor environmental differences created vastly different risk profiles. Proximity to disturbed forests remains one of the strongest predictors of outbreak vulnerability. Communities near recent deforestation show significantly higher outbreak rates. For example, villages within 3 kilometers of forest edges experience 4 times the outbreak rates of those farther away. Satellite analysis reveals that 73% of Ebola outbreaks since 2000 originated in these high-risk zones, which contain only 28% of the regional population. This stark contrast highlights how environmental changes can amplify risks for certain communities. Water sources tell another part of the story. Villages relying on unprotected surface water, rivers, ponds, or shallow wells, experience nearly double the outbreak rates of those with protected water systems. During the 2017 Marburg outbreak in eastern DRC, investigators traced 22 cases directly to a single riverbank where infected bats roost. The same water source served as a drinking supply, laundry site, and bathing area for multiple villages. This example underscores how shared, unprotected water sources can act as transmission hubs. Transportation routes also play a critical role in disease spread. Outbreaks move along trucking routes 40% faster than through areas with limited transport networks. Market towns serving as regional hubs are particularly vulnerable. One superspreader event in a busy market can seed infections across an entire district. Road quality matters too. Villages connected by paved roads see faster outbreak progression than those reachable only by footpaths, with the virus moving at about 7.3 kilometers per day along paved routes versus 2.1 kilometers along dirt trails. These transportation networks create invisible highways for pathogens, linking distant communities in ways that amplify outbreaks. Population density amplifies these geographic risks. Compact villages with household spacing under 15 meters experience case clusters at 3 times the rate of more spread-out settlements. In one documented case, a single Ebola patient in a densely packed neighborhood led to 17 secondary infections within 2 weeks. The same index case in a village with wider spacing produced only 3 secondary cases. Housing materials also play a role. Outbreaks spread faster in communities where over 60% of homes have dirt floors compared to those with concrete or wooden flooring. Small changes in infrastructure can make a life-or-death difference. For instance, one village in North Kivu, DRC, reduced its vulnerability by switching from shared water sources to protected wells and introducing household-specific latrines. Within 2 years, the village saw a 60% drop in waterborne disease cases and avoided secondary infections during a nearby Ebola outbreak. This example illustrates how targeted interventions can transform a community's risk profile, turning abstract mapping concepts into tangible survival strategies. Building layouts also influence transmission dynamics. Compounds with shared cooking areas show outbreak attack rates of 45%, versus 22% in villages where families prepare meals separately. Similarly, the practice of multiple families sharing a single latrine correlates with a 37% higher secondary infection rate compared to villages with household-specific facilities. These patterns emerged clearly during the 2019 Ebola outbreak in North Kivu, where transmission mapping showed infections radiating outward from shared community spaces. Traditional burial practices represent one of the most significant cultural risk factors. Funerals where mourners wash or touch the body account for approximately 60% of Ebola superspreader events. In one 2014 funeral in Guinea, a single event led to 85 subsequent cases. Other traditional practices, like communal nursing of the sick and healing ceremonies involving shared bodily fluids, similarly accelerate transmission. These cultural factors highlight the delicate balance between respecting traditions and implementing safe practices during outbreaks. Certain demographic factors also shape vulnerability.